And please welcome our speaker, Michael Lasky.
Well, I'm honored to be asked back. This is my second tour of duty, and there are even some people here who've been to the first one, and I guess there's no limit to how much punishment you're willing to take. This one will be a little bit different. Now, this is not Brand Bootcamp. I apologize. This is Mini Brand Bootcamp. We're all dressed very nicely. We don't want to get all sweaty, so we're going to do the light version. She called it the lunch version. That's a great answer. Actually, I'd rather call it this. I'd like to call it How to Be a Hero to Your Company or Your Client. So if you're a service provider, there are things you can do to make your client company be far more successful. I want to talk about those, and you will be a hero if you even give them some of the ideas. So I want to start out by having you wear a different hat. And to be sure, I actually brought one, and this is the C hat for company. So I want you to think of yourself as being the representative of the company, because you're going to be able to change the value of your company dramatically. I'm here to teach you, or to get you to thinking about brands in a different way than you ever thought about them before. And I've got a lot of material, so I'm going to go really fast, so stay tuned, but feel free to eat through this thing. And I want to give you a warning, first of all. I'm going to talk about big companies. Well, they're big companies now. Many of them were much smaller than your companies, 1, 2, 3 people. But they're very big names now. And the reason I'm talking about big companies is you'll know them. If I talk about companies you don't know, you won't be able to relate to them. But do not fall in the trap of saying the laws of gravity, the laws of brand do not apply to my company. They absolutely do, and they apply to all these big and formerly very small companies. So I want to take you back to 1994. Something very important happened. A guy in a garage came up with an idea and opened this company, which you do not recognize because it is no longer called Cadabra, because their lawyers said Cadabra probably will come out as cadaver. Well, the guy was Jeff Bezos, and the company ultimately became Amazon. That's not the interesting story, although it was pretty incredible to believe that people would buy books without ever having to touch them, and now that's how we buy all our books. And over time, Amazon changed the way it presented its brand. Not always a good idea to do that, but they did. So you know what they look like today. And in 1997, they did an IPO, came out at $18. How many of you bought stock at that time? If you did, you're probably not at this table. It's worth $300 billion today. However, something very important happened many years before that. Right here, Loring Park, Minneapolis, a company opened its doors. Do you know what this company was called? There it is. I used to drive by this company every day for 20 years, and I never gave it the slightest thought. Yesterday I was giving a speech, and a guy in the audience said, I know that company. I called them in 1999 and said, where's my book? And that's exactly what happened. 27 years later, in 1999, too many people were calling up the Amazon bookstore on Loring Park and saying, where's my book? And their answer was, you have been sued. Jeff Bezos got a bad letter in 1999 that says, Jeff, we love what you've done to our brand, and we want it back now. Now think about this. This is a $300 billion company. At that time, it was probably only a $20 billion company. It had the rock star name of the world, and yet, oh, by the way, I went to the store, and I bought the Amazon.com Defense Fund t-shirt. I actually have it here. What Jeff Bezos did, or his company did, is he violated one of the 3 laws of branding, which I'm going to get to in a little bit. You violate any one of them, and you don't have a brand. So, back to Brand Bootcamp. Fundamental to all of what I'm going to talk about is you have to come to believe that brand is probably the most important asset of your company, and it's the one you have the greatest ability to change its value. You can be more productive, you can cut costs, but what can give you phenomenal value? But I've got to tell you that there's a difference between a brand-centric company and a company with a brand. And most companies are the latter. They have a brand, but they don't use the brand. It is just an address. And those companies will run into serious trouble because they're not brand-based companies. So I call it brand centering, the art of the intersection between the art and law of branding, and the two have to come together. Well, being a brand-centric company, that is a company who really lives the brand, gives you a couple really powerful advantages. One, you're almost always more profitable. In fact, you're phenomenally profitable because people buy your products and services because they recognize your brand. And number two, and this applies in particular to the audience today, companies that are brand-centric are saleable. And be aware that at this moment, we are about to receive an avalanche of companies trying to get sold. And they're not going to be saleable because they're not brand-centric companies. All right, so how many of you know this company, the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China? Good, we have one person. They are the most profitable company in the world. Now, it helps that you have the country of China giving you all this free money, but they're the most profitable. But who is the most valuable? Aha, you know that company. Not so unprofitable either. So my question to you is, which would you rather be? And this is a very relevant question to this audience because if you are the most profitable company, that is great. But you probably have spent almost all your life investing untold amounts of time and energy and equity into your company. What you want is a second payday at some time in your future. And if you're under 30, that's real soon. And if you're over 50, that's never as far as you're concerned. You're going to want to get out of this company one way or another. If you are a valuable company, you will get a second payday. If you are a profitable company, you will shut the door. And at this moment, there are so many companies coming on the market because of people reaching their 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever, that there's an avalanche of companies for sale, but there's no avalanche of buyers, and they are going to look for quality. And where quality comes is in your brand. Okay, so what did these guys buy? I'm just going to punch up a bunch of them. And this is where you go into the disbelief mode, and you say, how could Instagram be worth $1 billion? And I've seen analyses of Instagram, and they said, you're right. It is not worth $1 billion. It's worth 500 million. Okay, I'll take it. Not bad. And of course, these are big companies. You know, you couldn't even fathom this. Well, let's see. Skype was started by 3 guys in Scandinavia. They sold the company 3 times. They even sued the first owner for patent infringement of the patents that they didn't sell them. And all these other companies, they're worth phenomenal amounts of money. Where is the value? Let's pick on this one, Uber, which unfortunately they changed their logo, but that's another story for another day. Okay. Investors think Uber's worth $50 billion plus. All right, where is it? Now, first of all, if you've never been on an Uber, I'll give you the short course. You bring up the app, you see the Ubermobiles, you pick one, and Simon comes, and it's going to cost you $23, and then you got to rate Simon as quality of driver, ship or whatever, and if he gets less than 4 stars, he's drummed out of the Uber sphere. So he really wants to be a good driver. Okay, clever idea. Oh, and by the way, no matter what you look like when you get into that Uber car, this is what you look like when you get out of the Uber car. And I know that because this is from their website. All right, so where is Uber's value? Is it in the 100,000 cars they own? They own no cars. Is it in the drivers they employ? They're trying really hard not to employ any drivers. What are their assets? They have an app. I get that. Lyft has an app too. I figure it cost them $1 million to put that app. So we have $1 million in hard assets, and we have $50 billion in value. Where's the differential? Now, if you're a CPA, you're going to say it's a blue sky or green field or some other color. What it is it's a brand. And you can't ignore that. I don't care if it's on the balance sheet or not. This is what investors are paying for companies that have built their brand. This is a company started with 2 guys. And now it's worth $50 billion. Your companies have more people, more assets, more momentum, but maybe you're not brand-centric. Maybe you're just a company with a brand. So what can brand-centric companies do that you can't? Well, first of all, you get better profits. Branded profits always sell for more. Branded services sell for more. I'll just give you a silly example. Prada shoes, Payless shoes. Figure out how much it costs to make a pair of shoes and how much material goes into a pair of shoes, and you can't explain the price of the products. No, they're nice, but are they that nice? The other thing that a brand-centric company gives you is momentum. So think about it. Every time you approach a new prospect, if your brand precedes you, they know your company, they've already formed some opinions about your company, you have a leg up, assuming you have a good brand. That is the momentum that you want to have. If you don't believe anything I say, and that's a reasonable place to start from, then take this other alternative reason for building a brand. Defense against disruptive change. Disruptive change is the kind of stuff that comes and you don't see it coming. Google decides to take over your business. Microsoft puts an app in Windows 10 that wipes out what you're doing. That kind of stuff you can't plan for, and there's nothing you can do about it except build a brand that's got a defense built in it. So we take one example, which is BlackBerry. And I won't spend much time on it. I was in Canada last weekend, and we couldn't talk about BlackBerry. Anyway, it's a company that had the market. By the way, how many of you had a BlackBerry? Ooh, in this audience. And how many still have a BlackBerry? Oh my God, none. Well, in any case, you can see the problem. How many of you have ever gone to a movie that has Dolby Digital sound? The answer is absolutely all of you, because all movies have Dolby Digital sound. But Dolby didn't start out in the movie business. I'm an electrical engineer, so this is my favorite part. Dolby figured out how to fix a problem that was inherent in those cassette tapes, the little thin ones with really thin tape that have 8 tracks on them and not enough width to give you good sound. They have lots of hiss. So if you're listening to heavy metal, they were great. But if you're listening to something quieter, they were crap. And Dolby figured out how to fix it with this wonderful circuit, which I won't have time to explain. It eliminated the hiss in analog audio tape. How many of you are listening to analog audio tape today? None. Dolby should be gone with the buggy whip. They're not. And here's why. When Dolby created their brand, they did not create a brand that was based on the following. We get rid of the hiss in cassette tapes. If they had done that, they would be gone. What they said is, if Dolby is involved in your sound experience, it's going to be great. So they transitioned from analog to digital, and without dropping a step. And they are today the biggest factor in digital audio sound in movies. And nobody would dare produce a movie if it didn't have Dolby in it. You see, the brand can give you a defense that you can have when stuff comes at you that you never knew what to do with. All right. I said this is relevant to this audience because some of you someday will want to sell your business. And valuation is going to be very important. Sellers have one view of what a business is worth, but it's the buyer's view that matters. And the buyers are looking for transferable value. They want to buy something. That is all they want. Well, what's available to buy? Well, management? No, we're selling the business. Management's going. Inventory? Very few businesses have inventory, and if they do, it's very old. Customers? Yes, customers matter, but not today's customers. It's the customer of the future that we want, or the customer that comes back. So it really is reputation. A business is worth what it's worth because of reputation, which gives the profits that make them look good. Well, how do you own reputation? Reputation is not a transferable asset. I want to sell you my business. We really are good in this field. Great. What do you got? If you don't convert reputation into intellectual property assets, the buyer cannot buy them. It's that simple. So I take you to the other problem of many companies, including some in this room, and I call it the curse of the me company. And the curse is this: you have made successful businesses. You are great leaders. You are good at what you do. And what you are is you. You are a company with a brand, but the brand is not your company. And as a consequence, when a buyer looks to buy your company, they're going to say, what have you got you can transfer to me? Well, we have a name, and the name's very well known. If you disappeared from the business, what would happen to the business? In many cases, it would be the end of the business. So part of being a brand-centric company is changing from being a me company to being a brand company. It's not a simple thing to do, and it takes time, but you got to do it. So let's talk about how to do it, how to build a successful brand strategy. It's a two-part story. Part one, you got to own the stuff that you're going to transfer. That seems really trivial, but I'll show you it is not trivial at all, and it's one of the factors where people fail most often. And the other part is your marketing has to be based on sound principles. Sound principle number one is you have to be a positioned company. You have to have a positioned brand. That means there is a reason for your existence, your customers care, and they will care even if somebody is faster, better, cheaper. That's not so easy to achieve. So let's talk about brands as objects. Now, we all know of words as brands, and then phrases like taglines and so forth. But there are so many other elements to your brand. And if you're not hitting on more than one cylinder, in other words, you don't have multiple elements to your brand, you're losing many of the drivers that can make you really valuable. The last two people forget very often, which is the product, if you have a product, or software, if it has an interface, that is a brand, if you make it a brand. But you got to know how to do it. Take a look at these. Just to show you some examples, sounds are brands. That Pink Panther is not just a brand for a movie, it has been the brand for Owens Corning fiberglass for the last 30 years. If it's pink, it's Owens. The thermostat, well, that was one we did, and that's a great story for another day, but they've had a brand for millennia. And the Doughboy, the brand is Motion. The Doughboy gets punched in the stomach. That is actually a brand. All right, so a brown truck pulls up to your house, and the only thing that happens to you is a big smile appears on your face because the stuff you ordered, which you cannot remember that you ordered, is arriving today. So when is UPS going to change the color of their trucks to something prettier? If they are a brand-based company, the answer, of course, is never, because they spent 40, 50, 60 years building that brand. Why did they pick brown? People say because it doesn't show dirt. It does show dirt. I have a brown car. They chose it because in the 1880s, Pullman coaches were this color brown, and that was the vehicle of the rich. Well, we don't see it that way anymore, but it is now a brand. How many of you know what this is? Some audiences get it and some don't. In my family, we are the proud owners of two pairs. Now, if you don't know what these are Louboutin shoes, and they cost $700 per shoe. And I don't know that they're available in singles. But here's the interesting thing. This guy in France, a very small company, said, we make beautiful shoes. And I agree they're beautiful, although I'm not a shoe guy. But we've made these gorgeous uppers. Now we're going to do something really outrageous. We're going to distract you from the beautiful uppers by painting the bottoms fire engine red. So that every time a person walks in those shoes, it says, I bought Louboutins. Now, in our family, I'm not the person who wears them, so I asked the person who is wearing them, why did you buy them? I put it in other terms and a little more forcefully, but she said, because they're fabulous. She didn't say because they're red and it shows that I paid too much for these shoes and they're really good looking. She got the brand exactly the way Louboutin wanted the brand to be, and that is when you see them, and you can't miss them, you want them. Now, the important question is not whether it worked. The question is, do you, any of you in this audience, have the guts to do what this guy did, which is detract from the most beautiful part of the product to emphasize a brand? That takes guts. Now, on the other hand, at the end of the story, this guy has a license to print money. Okay, all kinds of other shapes you recognize as iconic. If you don't make product and you make software, Tetris is a brand because of the little chiclet squares, and they've defended it and they own it and it's valuable. So there's all kinds of ways to make brands that are not standard. So brands can be the goods, they can be features for the goods, or they can be ingredients in the goods, or they can be methods and concepts. And the last one is the most important to you. You may have a company brand, and it may or may not be working as a brand. You might be the one that you just have one, but you don't use it. Then you have to think about all the services you provide. And if you provide services that matter to people, then you need to brand them because it makes a difference. I'm just going to show you an example of something, and we call them pseudo brands because they're really not products, they're services. There's also a thing called, it's Flow. Flow is a brand, and I happen to know the person who works with Flow to sign her up every year for a renewal on a contract, and she doesn't need to work anymore. So this is a real threat for the Progressive company. But on this slide are 4 brands. Progressive, of course, Flow, the scanner gun, and this word, name your price. Now that is a pseudo brand, which says, if you need insurance, tell me how much money you have in your wallet, and we'll give you what we can. Now that is not a breakthrough technology, but they were the first ones to say it. So they own it. Everybody else can't copy it. So there are brands powered by another brand and brands within brands, and you see them all the time, you just don't think about them. The best example is Gore-Tex. When you buy a coat that's got Gore-Tex, you're going to pay $200, $300 more, and their Gore-Tex is duplicated because the patents have run out, and you can buy a cheaper coat, but you won't know if it can perform the way Gore-Tex does. It is a brand within a brand that helps sell the other product. So how many of these brand elements are you using? Colors, shapes, sound, taglines. All of these things add to your brand. If you don't use them all, you're leaving money on the table. All right, so there are good brands and there are bad brands. And does it matter whether you pick one or the other? It totally matters. It's the beginning of the worst thing that could happen to you or the beginning of your great success. And it happens at the worst possible time when you start your company and the attorney turns to you and says, what are you going to call it? And when you say, I don't know, and then you come up with some terrible name, you have started on a slide down into purgatory. So good brands do these things. They build brand equity. If you're a public company, they absolutely raise stock price. Apple's valuation is so heavily dependent on the brand. In fact, the greatest risk of Apple was they weren't sure it could survive the death of Steve Jobs. It has done fine. But it was tricky because he was a me brand too, but not the only me brand. It strengthens your company against disruptive change, and of course, if you care about this stuff, which you shouldn't, of course, it cuts down the cost of defending your brand. So I said there are 3 rules of branding. Here they are. They're very simple, violated all the time. Number 1, if no one can own the brand, it has no value. That doesn't even make sense. Number 2, if you don't own the brand, then it has no value to your company. Well, that's starting to make some sense. And the last one is not the one that I do, but the one that I want you to do is you have to position your company before you start building the brand, or you are pointing in all directions. It's the proverbial match in the sun. Without focus, you're going nowhere. And this is routinely skipped. And I sometimes have to get into the business of teaching people this. All right, first rule. If no one can own the brand, it has no value. So let's take a bucket. And brand equity is a long-term process of adding value to your brand. It takes a while. It's very incremental. It's a lot like pushing on a boxcar. You can't see it move, but once it starts moving, you can't stop it. Brands are exactly that way. You got to be able to go in for the long term. But What happens if you pick the wrong brand and the bucket has holes in it, or worse yet, and in many cases, it has no bottom at all? Well, who in the world would do that? Oh, well, I think I can show you some examples. Well, here's the brand spectrum. This is probably the most important slide of this whole thing. These are the ones that are really valuable. Now, Kodak is no longer a valuable brand, but they had a 150-year run. I think that's pretty cool. George Eastman did not invent film. He invented the film on a roll. You remember Matthew Brady in the Civil War pictures with the big camera and the glass slide? That was not going to make amateur photography. He invented putting it on a roll. So why didn't he call it Roll Co. or Film Co.? Well, here's how he did it. I don't know if you can replicate this one. He said, I like the letter K. It will start with a K, it will end with a K, and I don't much care what's in between. Now, that's a crazy way to pick a brand, but did it work? Yes. And all these other names are fairly crazy. Now, let's go over here a little bit. What do you think they sell at the battery store? Well, people will say, if I didn't call it what it is, no one would know what we do. No, that's your job to build the brand. But if you put an arrow through the heart of your brand in the first instance you create the brand, you will never get the arrow out. How can the battery store, number one, sell out the things in batteries, and number two, have a brand that's legally ownable? They can't. By the way, you're probably really surprised about this one, the Weather Channel. I'm sure that they thought when they created this thing, we are going to corner the market because we're going to call it what it does. We are a channel on cable that does weather. But they can't own the word the. They can't own the word weather, and they can't own the word channel. And by the way, if you watched television, you found out the Weather Channel got kicked off the air once for several months by several cable companies that said, if you're the Weather Channel, you better be showing weather. We're tired of guys on highways running off slippery roads and people prospecting in Colorado. They run a bunch of reality shows. So they got nowhere out. They've got nowhere to go. So maybe they'll change their name to TWC. Oh, wait a minute. TWC means Time Warner Cable. I guess we're not going there. So they're in trouble. Could your brand survive the stress test? So just put your brand on that scale and see where it falls. The stronger you are, the more latitude you have to build a real brand. Okay, is this a bad hotel? Actually, it isn't. I stayed at it. It's in Germany. It's a great hotel. Is it a great brand? It is a terrible brand, not just in English, but a bad brand in German too, because bad hotel, really means a spa hotel, which is what it does. Therefore, it's not a brand. And by the way, this franchise is not expanding anytime soon into the United States. So what were they thinking? How many times have you bought something from Office Max and tried to return it at Office Depot? And they don't think it's funny. It was so not funny that one of them bought the other one. But they're not the only ones out there. How about PetSmart and Petco? I don't know if they even take returns. And then if you have this really great idea, why don't we park a car away from the airport and then you can save money? What do we call it? Park and Fly. Terrific idea, but then you can't stop, park, and go. And again, you know how they stop, park, and go? They bought them, if you want to do that. Okay, remember we started out this story with Amazon. So Jeff Bezos goes to internet in 1996 and says, I need a name. For $10, he could have had books.com. And of course, he didn't choose that. And you're thinking, well, yeah, because he doesn't sell other than books. But back in 96, for about 10 years, that is all they sold. Why wouldn't you take books.com when you had the choice? Because it was a disastrous choice. Yeah, it's an address. And Barnes & Noble owns it right now. And when you click on books.com, it takes you to barnesandnoble.com. It's a great address. Worth $1 million, $2 million, $5 million. Not $300 billion. The second rule of branding is if you don't own it, it has no value. Aha. A 1998 Yugo. So we're going to buy a used car, and you see the ad, and this is a really pristine Yugo. And the only way this is a pristine Yugo is it is 1998, because after that they just fell apart. So you call up the person who's placed the ad, and you come out and you have a look at it, and what is your first question? Does it burn oil? And the answer, of course, if it didn't burn oil, would it be a Yugo? No, that's not important. Has it been in an accident? How many miles? Those are all the wrong questions. What is the most important question you could ask about buying a property? Do you own it? Now, in cars, we don't think about that because there's a thing called a certificate of title, which is not always true. But in most cases, we assume that eventually we're going to check out to see who owns it. Turns out that in brands, there is no certificate of title. This is real trouble. This is how Amazon got into this problem. They didn't clear the title. And this happens, we did an informal study, and we found that 65% of companies like yours do not own your brand, possibly your company name, and cannot own your brand because it is owned by someone else and you don't know it. And you're thinking, well, if I don't know it and it's not a problem, where's the problem here? Remember the bucket you're filling up. What if you're filling up the bucket for 20, 30 years and then you go to sell this company? And by the way, guys like me are on the other side of that transaction. We have this thing called due diligence. And one of the things that companies come to me for is they say, we like the company, but we want to find out what's wrong with it. And by the way, we'd like to have a lower price. I guarantee you, I will get you a lower price because I will find something wrong with the title in the most important asset you've got because you may not even own it. In the United States, we have a three-tiered system. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but it's federal, state, and a common law system. The common law one is the one that's really scary. We call it the zombie trademarks. That's what Amazon Bookstore was. They weren't registered. Not that Jeff Bezos couldn't have found them, but they didn't. And it doesn't matter why they didn't. So we have a process called a clearance search. Now, a lot of people think it's something you can get on the internet, or you can, do it yourself, or you can just get it done for $75. And I want to tell you, this is the shameless commerce part. Do not skimp on this part because it will hurt you for the rest of your company's existence. And I can't say that. So I brought in Red Adair to say that. How many of you know who Red Adair is? Well, in the Kuwait War, the Iraqis blew up all the oil fields, and they called in this guy from Texas to put out the fires. His name was Red Adair. He's a legend. He's now dead. But he speaks to me from this particular slide, which says, if you think it's expensive to hire a professional to do the job, wait until you hire an amateur. This is not the time to mess up. And a company as big as Amazon, if they can mess up, you can appreciate that it's scary. So, how do they make the decision on whether you can use the brand? Well, how about this one? Purina Cat Chow or Purina Cat Chow. Are they confusingly similar? Of course, I made this one up. This one's too easy. How about this one? Starbucks and Charbucks, both in the coffee business. Confusingly similar? Court said no. I think a bad decision. Next one, Louis Vuitton and Chewy Vuitton for dog chews or purses. Is it an infringement? Oh, pretty bad news for Louis Vuitton to have things that look just like their purses being chewed. I suppose they wouldn't mind if they were their purses being chewed because they could sell a lot more. Court said, not an infringement. How about this one? Milanza and Potenza for tires, both tire companies. Are they an infringement? Well, if you've watched what I've just said, you're going to say no, and the answer is yes. So what am I telling you? Is in the close cases, you can't tell. So what you don't want to be is a close case because you're not going to know how it's going to come out. So if you've done the search well and Amazon didn't, then you got to go through the registration process. I'm not going to spend any time on that except for one thing. I want to tell you about one little thing that's important. When your client, when your buyer says to you, do you have a brand? Yes. Do you own it? Yes. Can you prove it? Yes. And is it incontestable? The answer will depend on whether you did all your stuff and you have 5 years. So if you register your brand and you don't have 5 years, it cannot become incontestable, which prevents others from canceling it who had better rights. So clients come to me and they say, well, how do I get 5 years in less than 5 years? And I think if you accelerate past the speed of light, beyond where time slows down and then time speeds up, it's a no-brainer. Otherwise, you gotta wait 5 years. So clearly you have a problem. If you're going to build a brand and you need 5 years and you can't get 5 years, I don't know how I can get it. All right, the third rule of branding is positioning. This is not what I do, but I have to help clients with this because it is so critical, and you need to be able to do this. All right, take all the employees in your company and put them in a room. No, put them separately in separate rooms and ask them, in 7 words or less, or 7 seconds, your choice, tell me why clients and customers come to our company. And if you have 7 employees, I guarantee you're going to get 8 elevator speeches, which tells me that you don't have a position. It's not clear. So let me help you with this a little bit. Brand positioning is the process of defining what connects your customers to you. It's a little more involved than that. But in the branding process, if you know your brand position, then you are ready to pick your brand. If you don't, you're starting off in second base with having no business being there. So what is a brand? It is a promise to deliver the same brand position over and over consistently until you can't stand it anymore, and then your clients and customers are just beginning to know who you are. You have to have tenacity. So here's an example. Again, a big company, but it doesn't matter. I've chosen it because it's easy. What is the position of BMW? Ultimate driving machine, engineering. Great, real simple. What is the position of this company? Safety, right? All right, so here's the ultimate question. Who has the better brakes? Turns out they have identical brakes made by Bosch. But because they're positioned differently, they treat the subject differently. BMW, yeah, we have brakes, but you don't need no stinking brakes. You're going to drive around the hazard. In fact, you're going to enjoy driving around the hazard. Volvo, brakes are really important. We have lots of them. You see the difference? And every once in a while, Volvo will get excited about being an engineered car, and BMW will talk about safety. And somebody in the upper reaches of the company will reach back and grab their neck and take that away from them. What is the position of Apple? Apple is so unique they don't even talk about it, but they have 2 positions, really simple. Number 1, our computers are easy to use. All of them, from the watch on up, they're all easy to use. Yes, and they're so easy, everybody tries to copy us, but we're always one step ahead of them. Believe it or not, easy to use. And by the way, safer to use because all the apps have to go through a process of being authorized. In Google land, it's Wild West. The second position, which is very important to our eyes, but not important to why we buy, except it totally is our products are always beautiful. I mean, why can't Dell and Lenovo make a MacBook Air? Because they don't think it's important. And it is not important to the performance of a MacBook Air that it looks great, but it accounts for a strong reason why people buy it. In the real brand bootcamp, I would go on to show you how to do a strategic position and indeed how to generate brand names, because generating brand names is a total psychodrama. It has nothing to do with reality. But I'll give you a very quick shorthand. One of the ways to find your strategic position is to create a tagline. It is not the same, but it's very close, and it forces you down to the most elemental parts of your brand. Remember the elevator speech. So a tagline can be good, and it can be disastrously bad. And here I've given a couple of disastrously bad ones and why. But I'll show you some really, really great ones, and you'll understand why this can help your company become a valuable brand-centric company. Because the brand and the tagline are working in unison, 2 of the many brand elements that will help you. All right. My favorite is Raid, it kills bugs dead. Now think about that. People hate bugs. I get that. How dead do they need to be? So you've seen this Raid kills bugs dead for 30 years, and I'm the first person to tell you that it's an absurd and grammatically incorrect statement, which is totally effective. Not bad. Ted their slogan is not technology, entertainment, design, which nobody knows, and it's not watch our stuff, it's pretty good. It's one step beyond. Ideas worth spreading. When you read that line, that says something really significant. The one that is actually the most effective of all time is De Beers. De Beers changed our whole view of why we have diamonds, because before World War II we didn't. And De Beers had way too many of those shiny rocks. And they convinced all Americans, and they're now working on Europe, that if you don't have a diamond, you're not married. And their slogan is a diamond forever. That tagline has lasted 65 years. If you can pull that off, that's not a bad outcome. What makes them work? They are relevant, they are important, believable, timeless, cerebral. Cerebral is the one I think is the most important. It's the hardest one to get to. Take a look at this. A lot of companies are not even sure of what they ought to do in their positioning. So Zillow now has two positions right now, or two taglines. One is your edge in real estate. Ho-hum. I don't even know what it means, and it certainly doesn't excite me. Notice the second one, find your way home. It didn't say find your home. That is a very different statement. Find your way home, because we have a mental attachment to home, not finding it. This one's even better, and this company has no idea what they landed on, because I've called them and they are, yeah? Okay, what do? You've seen them. Little trucks, green people, green trucks, drive around, clean up the mess. If you have a sewer that backs up, it is ugly. And they come in and they could do one of two things. Fire and water, cleanup and restoration. Yes, that's what we need. But lots of companies do that. What if we do something much more important? Like it never even happened. That's what I want. I've seen the stuff that's in my basement. I don't want to know that it even happened, because I got to go down there again. And if these little green men can get rid of it to the point that I don't even remember, sort of a Men in Black approach to cleaning, well, isn't that getting cerebral into the mind of the buyer? Doesn't have many more of these elements? My goal today was to make you think about brand differently. And the differently is that you can't ignore it. And just because you have a word, phrase, color, whatever that you call a brand, it does not make you a brand-centric company. And I promise you, at the time you want to sell your company, the reality is going to be apparent. So if you are an ongoing company, now is the time to change how you view brand, because it is the biggest delta you've got in your future. I call it brand centering, and it is an intersection of marketing and law, because if you don't own it, why did I do that? So you want to be a brand-centric company. A company with a brand is a fake, but nobody will tell you that. If you want to know more, there's a much longer story in the book, and let me end with this, and I'm hoping we can do this. It is a video. It's a parody on the iPhone 3. It's been a while, but it's pretty interesting. And if you can achieve this level, I think you have got it.
Welcome to Phone Mart. How may I help you?
iPhone 4. Where is the iPhone 4? I need an iPhone 4.
Oh, I'm very sorry, but we are currently sold out. However, we did finally get some more HTC Evos in.
What? What is that? Is it an iPhone?
No, it is that 4G phone on Sprint.
If it's not an iPhone, why would I want it?
Well, it's similar to an iPhone, but has a bigger screen.
I don't care.
The internet speeds are around 3 times faster.
I don't care.
It has a higher resolution camera on both the front and the back.
I don't care.
And it doesn't require you to be on Wi-Fi to use video chat.
I don't care.
Its battery is replaceable, as is the memory card.
I don't care.
It is highly customizable, everything from the widgets to the icons, the fonts, and even has video wallpaper.
I don't care.
The monthly bill is cheaper.
I don't care.
It can grant up to 3 wishes, even if one of those wishes is for an iPhone.
I don't care.
If you can achieve that, you've done what you need to do. Thank you for attending Brand Bootcamp, and if you have questions, we'll take them after this.